Welcome to Overeaters Anonymous, podcast number 7. This podcast will focus on individual stories of recovery. Throughout this podcast, we'll be referring to Overeaters Anonymous by its acronym, OA.
Joining us today is Kathleen. So, Kathleen, tell us where you're from.
I'm from England, from the northwest.
And tell us, how did you find out about OA?
Oh, it's an interesting story. I was doing one of the usual things I was engaged in as a compulsive eater. I had just had a very large binge. I was feeling very ill. My brain wasn't working properly because of the amount of food I'd eaten. But I was trying to calculate how many calories I'd eaten in the binge. And because I couldn't remember what I'd eaten, it was all kind of guesswork. And then I was trying to do a very complicated calculation about what I'd have to eat each day for what length of time to bring the average down to 800 calories a day. And this completely insane calculation, I had the radio on in the background. And I heard someone talk about that he was a member of Overeaters Anonymous. And I took a long time to write to the BBC to ask if they had a contact, because what the man was saying, I can't remember what he said, but something in me grabbed onto it, and I, almost like an instinct, I knew that's what I needed. Eventually I wrote to the BBC, and they sent me back an address of someone called Mike, who lived in London. It took me a lot of courage to write to Mike, but eventually I did. And I got a lovely letter back, and I still have no idea who this Mike was, but I owe him a great deal. And in the letter he said, OA is just starting in your area. He didn't actually know my area very well, because I live a long way outside Manchester on one side, and this group was a long way outside Manchester on the other side. And I was much too sick to drive a car. I wouldn't have been safe behind the wheel of a car. So I had to use public transport, and I know I had to leave somewhere around midday, and I got back very late at night to get to this meeting. At the time I was very sick. I tried phoning the person first who has given us the contact, and she was lovely, and she listened to me and talked. And I said, I don't think I can get to the meeting. And she said, well, we'll try talking on the phone. But I realised I had to get to that meeting. And at the time, I would be walking along the road, shouting out loud, I'm no good, go away everyone, and other such things. And I used to wear a cloak down to my ankles to hide so that no one could see me. I'd lost the only 2 good jobs I ever had because my eating was making me too ill to work. I turned up at this meeting, this mad-looking woman, and the person I'd spoken to on the phone came up to me and took both my hands and said, you're not alone anymore. And I still can't say that without emotion. And that was, I'm not sure now if it's 1980 or 1981, but that was a long time ago, and it still means a great deal to me. And I can remember one thing from my very early days in OA. The first thing was to hear people talking about what they did with food and being honest about it. I had never been able to be honest about what I did with food. In front of other people, I would eat very little. All my eating was done secretly. So that just to hear the honesty gave me a completely different ability to be a bit more honest with myself. And I remember that one of the things she said in the first meeting is the most important thing in your life is abstinence. And if you want to know how to do it, and she picked up a copy of the AA Big Book, banged it down on the table and said, all the answers are here. And she told me to go away and buy a copy of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and AA's 12 and 12. And I can remember reading through the AA 12 steps with a growing excitement. I'm sure I didn't really understand them, but the kind of excitement when I'd heard Mike talking on the radio, that I knew that was what I needed, even though I didn't understand the route or anything like that. So that was my first introduction to OA and how I found it. And I've been there ever since. I've never left.
And how long has that been?
It was 1980 or 81 when I found OA.
Was this your first venture into a program for your overeating?
It was the first venture into anything like a 12-step program. I used to, because I've been a compulsive eater all my life, and I would keep going to the doctor saying I'm ill and not telling them what was wrong. And eventually I was sent to the hospital for various tests so they could try to find out what was wrong. They couldn't find anything wrong. They sent me to the psychiatric department. And I actually fooled them because quite genuinely, when I was talking to the bloke, I had forgotten what I did with the food. So he sent me back to the medical people for more expensive tests. And there's a story from that. My first sponsor said I owed amends to our National Health Service because I'd wasted so much money. And the only amends I could make was to tell the doctor about OA and OA literature. But there had come a point with my eating by this time I was married, and I said to my husband, I need help. I got to the point of saying, I need help. And he found a counsellor for me to see. And she was marvellous. I learned a huge amount from her. I learned about my relationship with my sister and my parents. I learned to think about things differently. And when I was feeling really suicidal, she really drummed into me what it would do to my husband and the people who love me if I did take my own life, and left me feeling I'd be better for the world if I wasn't in it, but it would be awful for them if I did anything about it. But my eating got worse and worse. It didn't help my eating one little bit, even though there were other emotional things in my life that were being straightened out very effectively. So that was the only help I tried to get with the eating. I didn't even try slimming clubs because, quite honestly, I always feel I knew better. In my teens, I had been sent to a hospital dietitian for a slimming diet, and she taught me about calories. And I went through odd phases of under-eating because I would, once being taught about calories, I could work it myself out what to eat, and I wouldn't trust anyone else to tell me. If she said eat 1,000 calories, I think, well, no, it's much too much. I'll only eat 800, so I played games. So OA is my first contact with 12-step program.
Why do you think OA has been so successful for you?
It's very difficult to say. I think part of it is the complete honesty. I'd spent so much of my life being dishonest because I suspect, largely because of my eating, I always felt I was such a horrendously horrible person. But if anyone really knew what I was like, they would reject me. And I felt a complete failure inside and I tried to put on an act of being a kind person and a very clever person. And in actual fact, because I'd failed in actually everything I'd tried to do, it was an act. So I was very practiced at that kind of internal dishonesty. And OA gradually has been enabling me to look in a much more honest, straightforward way at myself and to think about myself with a term that's always used is humility. It's getting a really objective assessment of my strengths and my weaknesses, where I'm actually doing things well and where I'm not managing very well, and a complete acceptance that is where I am at this moment. So that's very important. The other thing about it is that it enabled me to see that my body size and the way I was eating were not the real disease. The real disease is actually a mental disease, and it's a very nasty one, because I went through the process of having to realize that if I took one compulsive bite, then my chances of actually stopping were fairly remote. I was told all the kind of practical things that they tell you in OA, how not to take that bite. I was using all the kind of tools and would wake up in the morning feeling absolutely determined, right, I will pick up the phone. I will spend the day in bed rather than eat compulsively. all the kind of practical things people had told me to do. I'd walk straight into the kitchen, forget all that, and think, I'll just eat this. And that would happen over and over again. And each time when I look at it, I could see that my thinking had switched, that it was no longer like my normal sane thinking. It was more like looking down the microscope, and all I could see was the food and the bite to put in my mouth. All the surrounding area, all the effects of what it would do had completely disappeared. And I would say to myself, okay, what is it I can do to stop my mind switching like that? And every single thing I could find to do did not work. Until on one occasion, I phoned someone who didn't know me very well, and I was a very proud agnostic. And she listened carefully, and I said, help, I don't know what to do. She listened very kindly and then said very quietly, I'm really sorry, I can't help. Put the phone down and pray. And if she'd known me, I don't think she would have dared say that. But in actual fact, I had no other option at that point. So I thought, well, I've no idea what this praying is. So I had a go. And eventually, in one of my home meetings, there was a nun. So I thought she'll be able to talk to me about praying. So I asked her. And the first thing she said was, I'm not very good at it. But actually, she was extremely helpful. And she said various things. She said, get the practice of prayer. Doesn't matter what you do when you're praying, but get the practice of the habit of sitting down at a certain time each day and doing something like that. And so it's got to be part of your daily routine, like cleaning your teeth. And then she said, be realistic. Don't say I'm going to do it for 3 hours a day, because you won't. 10 minutes, okay? And then she said, if you forget to do it, don't get angry with yourself, just get straight back to doing it. And she said, even if you say on one day, I'm not going to do it today, I'm just not going to do it, don't get angry with yourself, just get back to doing it. That got underneath my defences, because I was the kind of person who would say, make these beautiful plans, fail to do them for one day and think, oh, I'm no good, I'm absolute failure, no point trying. But that thing of just trying to build up that discipline, and my recovery started from the point when I started to do that. Even though what I actually do in that time has changed and the length of time I need has changed, but the real difference that OA has made is it's given me a spiritual program, in the sense that this kind of, I don't know what to call it, this kind of internal work, this way of looking at things from a different viewpoint, is what seems to be enabling me to, first of all, to get recovery and then to keep it. It's a way of life that I've found I really want more than anything else. So I'm rather fond of saying I'm still an agnostic, but I'm totally committed to doing the will of God. So, but that seems to be the most helpful thing about the program. And of course, the support of people and seeing the quality of people around me in OA is extremely valuable. And I found that when I'm giving service in OA, the more service I give, the more I'm with people who are themselves completely committed to this program of recovery, and the changes that it brings in them as people. And I watch the way they're behaving, the way they're dealing with me when I make mistakes or, and get things wrong. And I'm learning all the time, so that it's a learning process which has become extremely important to me. So I want to commit myself to that, and also the joy of being useful. When most of my life I'd been dependent on others and not able to be useful, to be in a situation where I can help has meant a great deal to me.
If you were to describe a typical OA meeting to somebody for yourself, what would that be like?
Well, I have to say they're typical meetings, of my home meetings, that they're typical of OA meetings in my area. First of all those meetings, they're very small meetings where we know one another very well, and all the meetings are studying literature of one kind or another. And at the moment, there's one on the AA Big Book, one on the OA 12 and 12, one on the AA 12 and 12. And we're really focused on our program. of recovery in those meetings. They're fairly informal. When I hear other people talking about their meetings, which are much bigger meetings, they have a much more formal structure. But we don't even decide ahead who's going to lead the meeting, just who would like to lead the meeting today. So someone who is in a bad place might say, no, I would rather listen today. And it seems to work very well in our case with our small meetings. It seems to function quite effectively like that. When we study the literature by reading the next little bit, and at any point where anyone has any experience about that part of program that's just been read to talk about, will say, may I come in now? And they will share that experience, so that there'll be meetings which the majority of the meeting is talking about particular aspect of recovery and our experience of it, rather than doing a lot of the reading. And then we have a space at the end for personal sharing, things that people need to say. And a lot of it, people are talking about funny things. Like one meeting, I was standing outside the door and waiting for the person who had the key. And it had been raining, and there was a half-eaten sandwich on the ground outside the meeting. And I thought I could eat that sandwich. No one knew I'd eaten it after all. I didn't. But in the general circle sharing, I said there was a bit of a half-eaten sandwich outside, and they all said, yes, we saw it. And I think this might be acceptable on your podcast, but you can cut it out if it's not. And one of these sort of general sharing, when you're talking about various mad things, and I said, when I feel bad about myself, I wear knickers with holes in them. And they all roared with laughter. And one or two other people said they did the same sort of thing. But I've never done it since. I was able to go home and throw away all the worn out ones. Because being able to laugh about one's stupidities, so that we spend quite a lot of time laughing at ourselves, because once I can laugh at what the disease does to me, it doesn't have the same power over me. Mm-hmm. So that seems to be an extremely useful tool. There is a lot of love and support in the meetings, genuine caring for one another. So, yeah, I don't know if that's enough but those are typical for my home meetings, not necessarily typical for much bigger meetings.
Thank you so much for sharing your personal story with us. It's wonderful to hear.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'm sure there must be things. I think one just little thing, because I think this is important. People around me have seen huge differences in me. My sister has said that I have changed almost beyond recognition. My husband is so grateful to OA that when I was asked to run for the Board of Trustees, and I said to him, we're getting older, I will have to be spending a lot of time away from home. Should I run? And he said, yes, I think we owe OA so much. You must do this. So that I think is important, and he throughout will back me like that with OA.
Thank you for joining us for this podcast. For more information on Overeaters Anonymous, please visit us on the web at www.oa.org or call the World Service Office in the United States at area code 505-891-2664.